Senior Director of Player Development, Kyle Haines, and funny enough, not the first Haines brother that I've ever covered. Kyle, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
I will say this as a fun story, just to kind of start us off. I actually, as I mentioned, I did cover your brother in a sense. He was the hitting coach of the Pittsburgh Pirates, and I felt like it was going to happen eventually where I accidentally texted Andy about a Giants prospect instead of you, and he was like, Justice, I don't run the Giants, but he was a good sport about it. I knew it was going to happen eventually, and I'm just going to let you know it's probably going to happen again at some point.
Completely understandable, and yeah, I mean, there's been some kind of unique crossover where I remember we had Brian Reynolds here to bring up obviously a forever Giants minor leaguer that we drafted and had for a couple years in development, and then him and my brother are really close now. They live down the road from each other in Tennessee, and then on the obvious one being Joey Bart. I'd like to think that me and Joey have a really strong relationship, and that some of his transition to the Pirates were because some of that you kind of remember that firsthand. Joey, once he went to Pittsburgh, I remember just talking to my brother, and then Joey getting on the bus and then calling me, and so kind of some overlap. Obviously the brother combo, but then also some of those stories behind the scenes. It's been fun to see those guys connect with my brother after I connected with him for years.
Tyler Beatty as well. We got a couple.
A
couple Giants going to Pittsburgh, or kind of vice versa there.
Yeah.
But obviously today is the day of the Spring Breakout game, the morning of the Spring Breakout game. So this isn't going to go up for a couple days. So if anyone's like, Justice, why didn't you ask about Luis Hernandez's 5 homers? We're not there yet. But one guy who I think is not going to be playing today is Josuar Gonzalez. Obviously, he left a game a couple days ago. Just what's his status? Before getting into the other prospects, just his status overall.
Yeah, I mean, we will. On the minor league side, we don't do press releases on the injuries, right? But for today's game, Jhonny Level will be sitted out as a precaution. He's got some lower back spasm. Day to day, he might even play tomorrow. But we're going to give him an extra day, and then Joshua's got a little slight hamstring tweak, so he'll be out probably at least a few weeks, something like that. So we'll see how it progresses, but there is zero reason to push him in this game as much as we want to see him out there, and he wants to be out there. Just going to make sure that he makes sure that he enters the year in a good spot, healthy.
You mean you don't want to push Josuar in just an exhibition before we get to the real season? You don't want to give him.
That doesn't seem.
This isn't playoff level baseball yet.
It's an emotional decision, but we try to use logical decisions here. So. Yeah, it's definitely not worth it. So.
Yeah, as much as it would be fun, especially, I was just such a fan of the decision when they made this a thing. And obviously we can even talk about how next year this is going to be a tournament. Just like how excited are you for that, like that prospect of the prospect of seeing like a prospect tournament?
Well, I'm conflicted because I think spring training is such a huge development window. It's not just a readiness level. And I feel like there's so many of the young players that there's pressure on them to perform and overreactions to how they play in 1 or 2 games. And that's already hard enough on the World Baseball Classic type stage to do that on a 17, 18, 19-year-old. And then when, my view on the Spring Breakout, it's an exhibition, it's a fun game. But I think we're facing Chase Petty tonight, right? I mean, he's a big leaguer who's going to be facing a 17-year-old who's never had a professional at bat. That is a huge discrepancy in, learning curve, age curve, experience curve, et cetera. And I think just not overreacting if, something goes south in March versus when it's kind of a, varying degree of veteran versus rookie ball type matchups on both sides.
I don't know what you're talking about, overreactions. I've never heard of that on social media. I've never heard of an overreaction to one at bat ever. I've only heard nothing but calm, collected approaches. Guys just going to be solid pros. I've never heard someone say after one at bat, this guy's going to be a future Hall of Famer. Never heard that ever.
It's there's nobody that good to predict that one way or the other. Some of the great players of all time. I mean, there's probably Hall of Famers who didn't start looking great till their mid-20s, and there's some that show it as teenagers, and everybody's development's different. It's just like life. That's why I love baseball personally. Development in baseball is a lot like life. You learn things at different times than others, and everybody's got their own unique story, and that's the same with player development. Everybody develops at different times, different experiences, and but yeah, I mean, the game itself, the Spring Breakout, phenomenal, but I'm more excited to see the kids finally get in a stadium in front of fans and music and And some of that's overwhelming. Some of them's never done that until this game tonight.
Yeah. And I did tell you this before we started recording. Unfortunately, I will not be at the Spring Breakout game because
Yeah.
one, Logan Webb is going to be pitching over at Salt River. It's his first start from the WBC. I hope you'll excuse me for miss. I was looking forward to it. I had it circled, but circumstances bringing me to another area of Scottsdale. I'll have it up on game day for sure.
Completely understandable. I think the irony is I remember when Webb was 17, 18 and nervous about pitching in front of fans. I believe it was Hillsborough maybe we played, and he was like extremely nervous pitching in front of a couple thousand people, and now he's pitching in the World Baseball Classic, been in the All-Star game for us, and it's just
2 times.
Twice. Yeah, I mean, finished second to Cy Young. That young kid who was nervous just pitching in front of fans, and now he's grown into a man, an ace of the staff, and one of the best pitchers in the world.
You obviously mentioned, the 17-year-old who's never had a professional at bat, and I think that fits the description of one Luis Hernandez, obviously the top overall. I know ratings can be ratings, but just for our purposes, the top-rated prospect of this international signing class that comes on the heels of signing Josuar, who was the top position player behind Roki Sasaki overall. And Luis is kind of in this ambiguous stage of his career where it's like there's not a ton of information on him, like as far as like StatCast stuff. There's not even a ton of games really, and honestly, even before going into the prospect portion of it, the evaluation portion of it, I think it's important to mention that he's here in Arizona. He's not currently in the Dominican or wherever else he would be at this time of year. Is it confirmed at this point that he is going to be starting the season in the ACL? Is that still kind of up in the air? Like, what is the status on that?
Yeah, that's locked in. He'll be in the Arizona Complex League. I know that was rumored back and forth for a long time, and there was a lot of rumors about his starting spot. He's going to start here in the Arizona Complex League, and we're excited for him to work with a lot of our development coaches, the most famous being Travis Ishikawa. He's coming back to Arizona League this year, and he'll be around the Arizona League team, and we're excited for our entire group we have here, but especially for Luis to learn from people like Travis Ishikawa what it means to be a Giant. But yeah, he'll skip over the DSL, so to speak, which is pretty aggressive, but not unheard of to skip over that level, especially someone his experience.
I mean, kind of to that point, like, again, this was something that had been kind of speculated going back to when he signed, just because he had played against kind of grown men in Venezuela, and the whole point of the DSL is to kind of get ready for the ACL. So what went into the decision as far as making that, as you said, pretty aggressive move to skip over the DSL entirely and just have him start the season in the ACL?
Yeah, there was a lot to it. I think his ability to perform against ex-pros last summer was probably the biggest driver. But we saw a lot of those at-bats live. We get the video from those games sent to us. We're staring them down. We're watching them even just last month, re-watching them, combining that with whether it be our tryout reports, our scouting reports, but also just a huge credit to our international scouting group. They've been following and tracking his progress for years. This isn't we just saw him work out a couple times. This is something that we've stitched together the pieces for years on, tracking him back to the first time our scouts laid eyes on him in tryouts, seeing how he's developed over the last few years. Once players actually arrive in the Dominican Republic for tryouts, so to speak, you can have them on site for a certain amount of days. I won't go through the rules, but I've been fortunate to be there a lot. Our hitting coordinators, our field coordinator, our pitching coordinators, they're all watching tryouts. They're forming relationships with the players. Some of them we sign, some of them we don't. And so we've got a good track record and head start on Luis, knowing who he is, seeing his progress, and when you combine it, you feel a little more comfortable making that decision.
I know at this age, especially because, as I mentioned, there's not a lot of video, there's not a lot of information, but you do see a couple comparisons that are thrown out, and like when you see those comparisons, I can imagine among the fan base that it instantly kind of salivates a little bit, and I'll be the one to temper expectations here. Let's not put too much on a teenager. There's obviously if you look at Baseball America's kind of there's a thing they have called risk, and like when they say high risk, it's not because like there's not belief in the prospect. It's just that this is a 17-year-old kid at the end of the day. These are a lot of teenagers at the end of the day. But the question I will pose to you is just in the time that you've been around him, I think we saw a video a couple days ago. It was like 100 100.7 mile an hour homer exit velo. Just in the time that you've been around him, in the time that you've had to see him in person, what's really jumped out to you about his profile overall?
Well, I just think he's so advanced for his age and how he plays the game. You start looking at just his maturity level, his conversations are just very advanced for his age. He doesn't probably have that one tool, two tools that really just stand out as holy cow, wow. And then others are like, wow, that's rough. That's going to have to iron out. I think depending on what evaluator they're going to like something different about his game. Some of them are going to say, hey, I really like how he's in control of his movements at shortstop. One's going to talk about his approach. One's going to talk about his gap-to-gap ability or ability to handle velo or break ball. Each one's going to mention something different. There's other players you look at and it's clear. Plus speed, plus power, and then you got chase, you got swing and miss issues, and they're all in consensus. I think the part about Luis is I think depending on your personal style of evaluation, you're going to like something a little different. He doesn't have the one or two thing that really just pops out, good or bad. He's a very well-rounded player compared to maybe higher profile guys at those age. Usually when you get a big bonus guy at 16, 17, it's like they're 6'4", they hit it over the lights, but everything else is flawed, or they are, incredibly fast, incredibly athletic defensively and struggle at the plate, and you would just have this crudeness to the game. He does not have that.
And so you would mention that with Josuar, he's going to be, probably a little bit of a delay to start the season, but, presuming health, they will both be playing in the ACL, and they are both projected as shortstops. What is kind of the plan there when both of them are healthy in the field? Is it going to be exclusively playing, kind of flip-flopping second base, shortstop? Is there maybe a plan to even, float one of them out in the outfield, or is it just going to kind of keep them in, up the middle there and kind of just see how that pans out?
It's a great question, and I think it's one that we're still going to debate. I think if you said today we needed to make a decision, the answer would be one of them plays short, one plays third, or one of them plays short and one plays second. And that might even mean Joshua plays short and Luis plays third, and it might mean when Luis plays short, Joshua plays second, just to kind of see, maybe give Luis a little more experience on the left side of the field, playing third, versus having to play second, because it's like looking at the game as in a mirror sometimes when you switch sides of the field. So I think, I wouldn't be surprised if we land at something like that, where, Joshua's got a little more experience at second than Luis does, so maybe it's them playing the middle together. We think they're both shortstops for sure, and we're going to give them as much time to play shortstop while respecting the other player's ability. DH will be used as well to maybe manage some workloads, and we're going to be creative. And we got other good shortstops. I mean, I think, or good infielders in general. Barreto's a great shortstop, Julian Barreto. Anthony Marquez, he's a great shortstop. So we have quite the balancing act to get those shortstop reps to the appropriate people. It might even be, say, Joshua at short for a week, and while Luis doesn't, and then they just flip each week. That way they get a bigger sample in a row, not flipping each game, so to speak. So I know that first week probably people will look into those lineups a little more in depth than they really need to, but the goal is to get them both as much shortstop reps as possible early, and then we'll kind of see how it goes from there.
I guess kind of building off that, how much of that is a fun problem to have, knowing that, because usually, we've talked about this previously,
Yep.
like the up the middle positions, whether it's shortstop, second base, center field, like those are like the premium positions. And, what usually, I think, one example that comes to mind is the Padres, where like they just had a ton of guys who played shortstop, and then you can kind of float them around. Is it kind of like a situation like that where if you have a guy who can play shortstop, he can pretty much play anywhere else in the field because of the athleticism and the wear and tear that's required to manage that position in particular?
I remember Jackson Merrill playing shortstop right on this field right out here in the Arizona League. So exactly what you're talking about. I have personal experience. One that flashed back to me was the Mariners had Adam Jones and Asdrubal Cabrera playing shortstop on the same team, and they had to balance them. And then Adam Jones ended up in the outfield, right? So I think, and that was like high A, if I'm not mistaken, in the California League. They had both Adam Jones and Asdrubal Cabrera playing short. And then Asdrubal ended up playing short in the big leagues. Adam ended up in the outfield. But, you never know where it's going to go. But it's better to have really good players than not have enough. So sometimes you get in those situations where, you're playing a clear second baseman at short just to have somebody to play short. And we've not been up in that situation here. We got I don't want to say a good problem, but it's a good problem to have too many good shortstops.
And for the aggregators who might be listening, I'm pointing to the camera for the podcast listeners. Kyle Haines is not saying that one of them is going to be in the outfield. We're just making comparisons. Do not clip that, take it out of context. But speaking of shortstops, obviously someone that kind of gets a little bit lost in the shuffle because of Josuar and Luis is Jhonny Level, and he obviously made it to San Jose last year, where he starts off the season has yet to be completely determined. But he's kind of another one of these shortstops that are in the mix in the organization. Just what have your overall impressions been of just his progression, and just kind of speaking to that point, how he could potentially, in this ecosystem of shortstops, maybe he may bounce around a little bit to other positions as well.
Absolutely. I mean, our hope is that Jhonny can stay at shortstop. I think we're going to be able to find a way to do that, because we also have Gavin Keelan. You got Lorenzo Miola. I could keep naming other names. We got plenty of people we believe in that are more than capable of playing shortstop in the minors and seeing if they can develop at short. But Jhonny, I think people are always going to kind of just look at him and be like, oh, he's short. But there's a lot of good short players in the big leagues, and Jhonny looks that part. This guy is very highly skilled, switch hitter who loves to play. He's got kind of that, that little man, mighty mouse power from both sides of the plate. But he's not just a power hitter. He'll hit line drives all fields. He's kind of that table setter that is really fun to watch. Now, how does he develop, right? I mean, physically, he's a little strong right now, so it's tough to project a short guy who's already strong. But he's highly skilled, and we think he can play some shortstop. And if not, he could be an offensive second baseman, has a floor for him, hopefully. But they're still young. We'll see how it develops. But he's a guy that, in other words, he's the number one shortstop prospect. But with us, we just have other names, so people instantly kind of just put him behind those others. But Jhonny could easily end up being, just as good or better than anybody we have in our system, in 5 years from now.
If you want to talk about little guys with power, I do not qualify, which is why I'm sitting here talking to you instead of being somewhere out on a major league field right now. But kind of sticking, up the middle positions, I want to shift over to the outfield a little bit, and someone who I was really intrigued by in last year's draft, and that was Trevor Cohen, your second selection. Obviously didn't have the second round pick due to the signing of Willy Adames. And for complete transparency on my part, whenever somebody gets drafted, like, I'm not going to pretend like I know all the 500, like the big boards. So whenever the draft rolls in, instantly just see like, all right, where's this guy on MLB.com's top 500? Where is he on Baseball America's top 500? And Trevor Cohen was not on either of them. Yep. And so when you see that, and when you're not even 500 picks in, it's like, okay, like who is this guy? Like, what's the background here? And, I did have a chance to see him last year at San Jose. Jacob Bresnian started as well. Yep. So that was just like a beautiful, like, checking off a couple boxes there. But, the bat-to-ball skills have been, that was his kind of bread and butter in college. It's really jumped out as well. He's just continued to hit in his short professional career. What did the organization like about him coming out of college, and what has he shown to you as far as his offensive profile, specifically with that bat-to-ball ability?
Yeah, I remember sitting in the draft room and just hearing our scouts talk about him, and we just kept getting more and more excited the more you heard them talk. And obviously, we look at the public rankings too, and I'm saying this guy's kind of interesting. And as soon as he came in, I kind of remember telling people, I mean, our scouts were like, hey, we would have been happy to get this guy in the second round. We didn't have a second round pick last year. And I said, I think you're still low. I think if we redid the draft, like, some teams should have considered this guy in the comp round, second round type window here. I know I talked to Jim Callis a long time the other day, and he said he had a lot of the New Jersey scouts trying to help, paint a picture here, but he didn't play center field in college, which a lot of the center fielders don't. I don't know why. Dakota Jordan didn't play center in college, and many other good. I remember Steven Duggar didn't play center field in college at Clemson, right? And so it's like there's a lot of names who don't play center. I mean, Austin Slater played infield and ended up center field for us. And there's that unique profile where whoever Christian Yelich is playing first base on his high school team. So you start to visualize and project where they can go. And I think so that probably hurt Trevor a little bit, because people said, hey, doesn't have a lot of homers. He's not playing center field. So I think that was tough for people to swallow from a northern school. And unfortunately, a lot of the reports are piling in right now. It hasn't warmed up yet above, a certain latitude. I
would like that here.
Yeah, it's but a lot of the scouts all go south, and then they got a lot more reports on the teams in the south, or the northern schools, aren't ready yet. And then by the time they get going at the end of the year, some of those boards already started to mock themselves forward, and I huge credit to our scouting department on that. I mean, he just came in from day one, and he just showed professionalism, bat to ball, all the qualities we want in our hitters, line drive, all field, I think future power potential, and just a professional at bat. So huge credit to our scouting department on finding that profile to work with here.
If you, kind of hypothetical question, if he just played center field straight away from start to finish, do you think like, he would have even made it to the third round? Like, it's obviously tough to like know because again, like Northeastern schools, like it's difficult because those guys just don't get any shine. And obviously, Mike Trout's probably the best example of that just because of where he played. But do you think that there may be been a little bit more of a case for him to maybe go second round, even maybe like late first round if he played center?
Based on the feedback we got, there was a lot of scouts from that area pushing hard for him to go even higher than we picked him from that area. I just think on the national level, it's hard to pick someone who didn't hit a bunch of home runs and, they're staring at right field that high. So it's just tough for the entire groups across 29 other teams to swallow. And like I said, our group had a great vision for that. And he looks like a first-round caliber player from what we've seen, if you ask me.
I think it was maybe Michael Holmes who may have mentioned this, but I think the one thing that really impressed was I think it was pre-draft interviews. I'm not going to ask you to say all the questions that were asked or the responses, but what was really stuck out about him just throughout that entire process, like kind of what as you're envisioning. What he could be, going forward. Like, what were maybe some of his the cadences, the maturity level, maybe that really stuck out during that process?
Yeah, on those, I'm not really involved in those. I talked to Holmesy, but they're experts at forming those connections, and honestly, it's just kind of, hey, I want to get a feel for the guy, and see who their most human version is. And our scouts, not just ours, scouts across baseball, they're amazing connectors of people. They're great evaluators, but people will lose track of how much work they do connecting with families, connecting with players, so that way they get a good feel for what we're getting and making sure that we don't just get a good, talented ball player, we get a great giant on and off the field.
One of the guys that, as we're talking about all these position players, one of the guys to highlight as well is Keyner Martinez. He's obviously going to be starting in the spring breakout game today. And I think this time last year, again, we're not going to – I know like prospect rankings can be prospect rankings, but, he wasn't a guy that was, considered a top prospect in this organization. Same time last year. Now he's the number 7 per Baseball America. He's made a lot of strides, particularly with his breaking ball. Just how have you seen him really progress from last year to this year, specifically in commanding that breaking ball?
Yeah. Keyner, he didn't even pitch in the Dominican Summer League. We skipped him over. And, in some regards, I think if he'd have stayed in the DSL, we would have seen him pop there. He showed flashes of plus slider, plus velo. And we needed pitching in the Arizona League. So what is this, 2024, like May, it's about May. And we said, why not just get him here and just expose him to as many advanced things as possible, because we feel like he could handle it. And he came in, struck out 6 point whatever per 9, you can look it up, and showed a little velo, a little slider. But that year of growth was tremendous around our pitching group, our pitching coaches. And then he took that lessons learned and really took off last spring on us. And the velo took another step forward. The slider took another step forward. The confidence took a step forward. And then he just became a man amongst boys in some regards. And then we said, hey, this guy relieved for us last year. Let's start him, and let's work on this changeup. And we did it, and he started adding the changeup. And it's just been a great story and a huge credit to him that development happens for different people. He went from 93, 94 to 95, 98 last year with touch 99 with a devastating slider. You can look at Josh Norris's Twitter feed. Probably he's got a video of that somewhere. I don't know if it's called Twitter anymore. I'm not up to speed, but
colloquially.
So. Josh had some good video, and Josh from Baseball America was texting me going, hey, well, who's this guy? I'm like, you better take note. And Keyner has been an amazing story, and excited for him to showcase in this spring breakout game.
Kind of speaking to take note, obviously, every time we have a conversation, I'm like, we could just talk about every single guy in top 30 and so on and so forth, and we'd be here until the temperature starts getting to reasonable levels. I think it's going to be like 100 or something, whatever it is today. It's why the game had to be pushed back. Yep. But, as we kind of finish up here, I'll leave you with this. Who are some of the guys that, again, like prospect rankings are prospect rankings, buzz is buzz, but who do you think maybe one or two guys who, maybe deserving of a little more shine that they're maybe not receiving, or maybe just some guys to keep an eye out on based off what you've seen here in person?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, we got 165 guys under roster.
I was going to say, there's a lot of guys
honestly,
to choose from.
I believe in each one of them. I believe they're all underappreciated. I'm trying to think of a standout. I get asked that a little bit, and I change I still feel like people are low on Dakota Jordan.
Mm-hmm.
I think the world of Dakota's leadership abilities and who he is. But man, this guy, I still feel like the industry should value him more, believe it or not. Even though they do value him, I still feel like they're low on him. And I think Giancarlo Cio is a dang good baseball player. I think this guy can hit. He's always hit. He's always controlled the zone. He's starting to come into power, and he's athletic enough to play many positions on a field as a left-handed hitter. Those guys stay around a lot. I feel like those guys are maybe known, but still people haven't seen them break out.
Kind of speaking of Cio in particular, it was actually the game in Mesa against the A's where he homered. And again, I try to be, like knowledgeable as possible, but he was someone that I just didn't have like a big background off, and that like he homers and I'm like instantly on Fangraphs like, who is this guy? And it's like 800 OPS last year. I'm like, okay, there's something here. I'm gonna jot him down. I'm gonna circle it. And then to the point about Dakota as well, just when you see a guy that has like the football background that was also like a wide receiver and just like that combination of power and speed, that doesn't come around a lot. And you can start like, again, you don't want to, put the weight of the world on a guy like that. But like when you see that combination of tools and like, again, to the leadership ability, I think when I talked to Travis Ishikawa last year, he mentioned that as well. You start seeing, the vision. And so to that point, I think that, I think those are two guys that are worth keeping an eye on. Any pitchers though? Any love for any pitchers?
All right, I'll give you a couple deep guys that showed up in the camp. So for deep prospect watchers, Alexander Fuentes has been maybe one of our best pitchers this spring. He pitched in the Arizona League. I think the way we talk about Keyner, Luis De La Torre, who we'll see in tonight's game because he's going to come in after him, I think Alexander Fuentes is going to be a guy that in May people are going to talk about. Leandro Rodriguez comes to mind, name no one talks about in those prospect circles. I think he could break out this year. And, I'll give you some very deep ones.
Please do.
For those prospect people who follow the top 30, the names they've probably never thought of. I think those are guys that if you're coming to minor league spring training games, you better watch those guys pitch because, I think this is the year they break out.
Those would be some guys that I keep an eye on over the course of the season. Even as I'm watching the major league games, got to keep an eye out, got to show some love to the minors as always. Kyle, this was fun. Really knowledgeable stuff as always, and looking forward to having more of these conversations over the course of the season.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate having me on, and happy to talk prospects anytime.
Yes, sir.